Hey everybody, welcome to the live stream. It's me, Colton, here once again to share some photography experiences with you all. So hopefully we can, talk about photography, learn a little bit from one another. I will, as far as this live stream goes, kind of always in the air, always a little bit open-ended. If there are questions that you all have, if there are things that you want to talk about, or if there's even like topics, photography related that you want to bring up, then, this is the perfect format to do so because we're live and I will be able to talk and change the topic based on what all you guys would like to talk about. In addition to that, if you are watching after the fact and this is not live, you're watching the rerun, so to speak, of this video, then, same thing. Feel free to comment on anything that stands out to you, ask any questions, and propose any topics because I always go back and respond to all the comments that I get, but also any ideas or topics can always be incorporated into the next live stream. So as far as this live stream goes, a few things that I want to do. We'll talk about photography stuff here at the top and kind of talk about some channel related stuff. We might get into some discussions about camera stuff, photography elements, whatever it may be. But a big thing that we'll also do, two big things. One is I'm going to go through my sort of November recap for the month of November. Historically, I say historically, like the last 2 months, I've like made a dedicated video on YouTube for my sort of like monthly recap. But I think going forward, it might actually make sense just to incorporate that into the live stream. So we did a couple where we made them like specific videos, and I think now I'm going to try out like just incorporating them into the live stream and see what makes sense going forward. And then the biggest part of this live stream that we'll do probably here in a little bit is I'm going to make some candy art. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to set up all of the candy, photograph it, probably talk a little bit about what my process is, what I'm thinking, what I'm doing as I'm going through all of that. And then I'll also bring it into the computer. We'll pull up Lightroom and we'll start editing that and kind of take it from beginning to end. So we're going to essentially live create some candy art, and it'll be a little bit holiday themed because what I have here is Jolly Gingerbread Gummies. So these are the ones that we're going to use. There are some little gingerbread guys in here. And then there's a bunch of like, sort of, I don't even know what these are, like berries. I think one is a gift, maybe like a present. Maybe a couple of these are presents. And then one looks like it has letters on it. So we'll find out what all is in here. But yeah, we'll be making some candy art with this live on stream. And also going in and editing that so you guys can kind of see what are some of the things that I do to the candy artwork. And then probably whatever we create will be one of the images that I'll post up on Instagram here sometime soon within the next couple of weeks. So yeah, that's the plan for our live stream today. And feel free, as I mentioned, to jump in, join the conversation, chit chat. I've got some tea here. I am a little tinge under the weather. I was feeling a lot worse yesterday, feeling a bit better today. And, but I have new symptoms. Like now I have a sore throat a little bit, just a faint sore throat. So I'm being good. I'm having a little tea. I have some water here. Maybe not the smartest idea to do a live stream and talk a lot when your throat is a little sore, but what are we to do? But I think starting us off here, unless folks have things that they, want to talk about, I did want to talk about some upcoming videos for the channel, as well as maybe some further insight into videos that just went out last week and the week before. So upcoming video I'm super excited about is a carnival shoot where I went out to the carnival and I collaborated with another local artist who primarily does like videotape footage of live concerts. So things on VHS, High 8, stuff like that, VHS-C. I don't know all the formats. I think those are maybe 3 formats. But we went out and we shot a bunch of stuff at the carnival. So he was mostly shooting video on tape, which looked super awesome. And then I was mostly taking photographs, but I was using a camera from 2006. So that was the Olympus E500. And I will tell you guys, I will humbly admit that I think 2 years ago, I had this idea of buying, not that this is like, I came up with this wonderful idea, but I had the idea of, hey, I should pick up one of those lens filters that kind of creates like a hazy, kind of smoky atmosphere when you're taking pictures of light sources. It does all the halations and everything. So I picked up a Black Smoke. Whoa, gosh, what was it? Black Pro Mist, I think it was, filter like 2 years ago. I don't think I ever used it outside of like one minor test. And so this video that it will be going out on Saturday, was to basically go out to the carnival and take photos with that filter on a camera from 2006. And then simultaneous to that, having someone filming a lot of the video B-roll on physical tape, which was really, really cool. So super excited. That's going to come out on Saturday, and I think you guys will like it. I definitely enjoyed some of the photos. Maybe we'll pull up a teaser photo if anyone's interested in that here on the stream. But that's one video that's coming up. I'll also have a recap of like my top 3 cameras from this year. I think at least one of those cameras is going to be really obvious, and I would be willing to bet most folks who watch this live stream will be able to guess at least one of the cameras that are going to be in my top 3 for the year. And those are really like the next 2 that are coming up. There is also going to be a candy art, maybe like holiday themed session that in part we're doing today on the live stream, but also we'll have that we can do for some additional stuff, and we'll put into like video format. So I'm going to try to remember to record the part of the live stream where we actually do the candy art so that potentially I can use some of this footage. But we'll see. So, but I did want to talk about the Canon R7. That is a camera that I picked up in September, like around the 15th, maybe like the September 12th. And so far, like, honestly, that has been a phenomenal tool. And so I've been really enjoying shooting with that. And I'm excited because when I first picked up this camera, there was some issues with lens selection. And so the exciting component to all of this is that it looks like there are a lot of new lens coming available for this camera. I would pull this camera out, but I've got it set up to use for when we do the candy art stuff. But I've been excited to see, like, Sigma has come out. They've released 2 zoom lens. I've got one of them, and it works beautifully. And then they've also put out a couple, I think they have 4 prime lens that are scheduled to go out. And then Tamron just announced a lens for the RFS system. And then we also have I think it's Rokinon is doing a wide angle prime. And then I want to say it was Viltriox, or is it, I think the brand is Mickey or Mikey. I literally have one. I'm looking at the lens. Meke. I don't know how you pronounce that, but I think they might also be coming out with one that's like an autofocus or something. So several different manufacturers coming out with lens. I've also heard from Canon. Well, I didn't hear from Canon, but I heard a rumor that Canon was going to be in 2025 putting out two, they call it professional level lens, but at the end of the day, like two higher quality lens for their APS-C mount, which I said from the very beginning, like the fact that Canon only has three, I think they only have three budget lens for their APS-C cameras up to this point is kind of sorry, and I criticized them for that, but it is nice to hear that not only have they opened it up to third parties for the APS-C stuff, and you've got at least 4 different manufacturers putting out lens now for that system, which I think will come very quickly. Sigmas obviously have already dropped like 3 or 4 lens. But then you also have Canon, who's going to put out some first party, higher quality, professional quality, they maybe call it, for the APS-C line. So I think that's going to make it a nice, well-rounded system. And I've heard, although if you guys have heard differently, let me know, but I've heard that Canon is also planning on potentially putting out a new successor to the Canon R7. So we might be getting a Canon R7 II. Not something I think I'll pick up, but nice to know that they are, kind of doubling down on the system and like releasing a upgraded model that's still kind of within that flagship realm. I'll be interested to see if they make any physical body changes, because the Canon R7 is a pretty standard layout camera, but they moved the scroll wheel up underneath the joystick. So the joystick's in a pretty standard spot for a joystick, but the actual control wheel has moved over there. So I'll be interested to see if on the R7 II, if such a camera exists, if they will have that same joystick, scroll control wheel setting, or if they'll kind of revert to a more traditional style. I hope they stick with it. I've enjoyed it. I think it actually makes a ton of sense, but, depends on what they saw in terms of, I guess, market adoption. I do hope they make a better loop system for the lens strap. Like, Canon has got to have one of the worst, like, I said lens strap, I meant neck strap, but like they've got to have one of the worst neck strap loops. It's so thin and small. It's really hard to put any kind of neck strap in there, and they've had it for years. I don't understand it, but hopefully they'll change that. But that said, I do want to jump over to basically doing a November recap. So as I mentioned before, this is something that I've kind of done historically in video format. The last 2 times I just created a video and published it. And this time I want to look at basically doing it as part of the live stream, because I think it maybe makes more sense content wise to just do it in the live stream as opposed to doing it in its own standalone video, because, maybe only a few people are interested in some photos that I shot in November. So without further ado, let's jump over to the photos. All right. So I've got 5 photos here, if I counted right, that are all photos I took in the month of November, same format as the videos that I posted on this. But if you've never seen one of those videos before, then essentially the concept here is that, you know, for my socials and for stuff that I post on the internet, a lot of times, you know, you try to go for a unified sort of vision or a unified sort of language. And so a lot of the stuff I post is very specific. It's very much like the candy art stuff, the long exposure carnival series that I've been doing, occasionally some portraits. But there are a lot of photos I take from kind of an artistic standpoint that don't end up getting posted anywhere. They don't get used in any videos, and yet they're still photos that I'm excited about, still want to share. And so that's the concept here, is that we're going to be looking at photos that I took in the month of November, kind of recapping those. And there are photos that otherwise would maybe just get lost in the hard drive afterlife. So our first one here is a bunch of license plates. That's pretty obvious. But there is a part of town I'm a huge fan of here in Austin. It's called, I guess, the North Loop area is at least what I call it. I don't know if there's another name for it. But some of my favorite stuff is over there. We have We Love Video, my absolute favorite spot. I should probably see if they would ever want to do like a partnership or something in the future. But it's just a video rental, local nonprofit video rental. You just rent DVDs and Blu-rays, just like Blockbuster back in the day. So it's a really cool spot. With the added kind of cool element being that they have a small movie theater in the back of the video rental spot. So they have like movie theater quality seats. I think there's like 3 or 4 rows of movie seats. I don't think you call it movie seats, but whatever, chairs. And then they have a large projector, and then they show movies. So they'll do really all kinds of stuff. Like sometimes they'll do big movies like Back to the Future. Sometimes it'll be smaller movies that, you know, nobody really saw, like The Ice Cream Man. Cannot recommend that movie enough. But then they also do a lot of local filmmakers will showcase their movies there. Even local like community groups will do movies. So like they'll maybe do like movies for, I can't think of one. Like I'll just make up one, but something along the lines of, okay, we have like Hispanic Heritage Month, and we have like a Hispanic Heritage group that are putting on a movie based off that at We Love. So something along those lines, but a really cool spot. So that's there. There's also, there's Room Service Vintage. There's my favorite pizza place that's on that street. There's my favorite vintage clothing shop on that street. So North Loop just has like all the best stuff. And a lot of it is locally owned, locally operated. There's no like big chains or anything right there. So it's a really cool part of town. But bringing us to this photo, there is a wall that I think is part of a coffee shop / restaurant called Double Trouble that is just like a wall of license plates. And I see it all the time. I think it's interesting. I've taken a photo of it a few times, and I've hated the photo every single time. And then for whatever reason, I said, I'm going to try it again. And I shot a photo. And this time I was like, hey, I actually like it this time. And I think part of it is there's some different colors here. There's some different, you have like this license plate that my face is covering. So let me hide myself momentarily. Let's see. We'll hide that. Yeah. So now you can see there's this kind of rusted out license plate. You've also got a license plate that's like really faded and it's just like turned into just chrome, just metallic. And then you have a bunch of different colors here, a bunch of different states. But also what really stood out to me with these is the fact that you have a few different ones that are Texas specific that kind of take me personally back, which the one in the top right, that's a Texas one, and it's got a little, it may be hard to see in the live stream, but there's a little tiny shuttlecraft, and it's because it's paying homage to the, Houston location for NASA. And that's like the first Texas license plate that I feel like I can remember, from my childhood. Like that's the first license plate that I can think back and say like, oh yeah, I remember that license plate. And I remember it being like really, really cool. And it seemed like it was around for a long time. And then it got replaced. I believe the immediate replacement was a space shuttle with like an American flag on it, which is also here in this list. But I think what it, when they fully redid it and they fully did like a full makeover of this license plate, it's the one diagonal from that top left license plate. And I remember when that came out, I was like, oh no, they ruined it. Like they went with some lame design, and they should have just stuck with the old school style. Like you have the space shuttle and a cowboy, and it was perfect. But now, as an adult, where we're many years removed from even that license plate, looking at it now, it's like, oh, actually I kind of like that, like, I don't know, airbrushed or maybe like paintbrush style effect for like the red, white, and blue and the star up in the left-hand corner. And so it's like it's grown on me, because then that one was like the default for many, many years. And you have a few other Texas, license plates mixed in here too, where they've kind of, done a few different styles over the year. I don't know how often they redo them or like why they redo them, but yeah, anyway. So I thought that was a cool photo. And the fact that I was able to get it like almost perfectly straight with very little, distortion really worked for this particular image. So I was satisfied that I feel like I finally photographed this license plate wall in a way that I actually like. So we'll jump on to our next one here. And if you guys have thoughts or questions about any of these, let me know in our live chat. But the next one here is from the carnival. Now, this carnival came through for about, I want to say 2 weeks. It was here. And in that 2-week period, I went minimum 4 times. I'm trying to think if I went a 5th time, but I went twice to do long exposures. And then I went one time to do the Black Pro Mist filter on the E500. And that video is coming out on Saturday. And then I went one final time with my girlfriend, not to do any photography, but just to actually experience the carnival. And we only ended up doing like one ride, but it was still a lot of fun. So this was from the very first time that I went, I think. It might have been the second time I went. But, I went there to shoot some long exposures. And I was getting some kind of like video B-roll so I could put together a video where it's like, oh, look, here I'm making the long exposure, and then here's the picture. But I started just taking a few photographs also while I was walking around. And I saw this happening and kind of unfolding. I was like, ooh, I want to take a picture of this. And part of it was like, you have these people involved in an interaction, but you have all this really beautiful color behind them. And it's a really colorful shot. But then when I went to edit the photo, I started to really appreciate the people that you have here, because on one hand, you can't really see anyone's face fully. Like you are really seeing like the back of their head. At best, you have like a little bit of a profile on this girl, but then the guy who's actually facing the camera is like bent down, so you can barely see his facial expression. And yet you still have a little bit of, an idea of what's happening. You can start to like fill in the gaps of where the image leaves off and start to fill in like the context of maybe like what's happening, what people are thinking. And it looks like essentially they're putting some money down to get some darts so they can play this game. I also feel like this person who's in the hoodie almost maybe looks like they might be smiling a little bit. Hard to tell, but that's kind of the gap that I'm filling in with my own brain. We got Aliens for Humans in here. Welcome to the live stream. Alien said, I like that you can win a Bob Ross doll. Yeah, it is funny. I didn't think about that. I didn't realize that was a Bob Ross doll, to be honest, until you just called that out. But yeah, it totally is. That's hilarious. It does make me kind of wonder what other dolls do they have in here. They do have some really random stuff at these carnivals, though. Like they had a Rick and Morty pickle that was in one, but it was like they only had one of that doll. So it's just like, is that because a lot of people want it, so people have one and picked that, or what? I think also there's this critter right here that looks very familiar to me, but I cannot place what it's from. So I'm not sure. But yeah, you also have your staples. You got Mario. You got Pikachu. You got a panda. There's always some kind of bear or something like that. It looks like you also have some Nikes. So like, I guess you can win some fake Nike slippers, I would imagine is what those are. But yeah, really interesting spot. So I was glad that I got this photograph, especially because it was just so colorful. And, you know, I love color. We have this side towards the screen in there. Hey, he says Peppa Pig. Okay, that sounds familiar too. I need to look that up later because I feel like Peppa Pig is not maybe from my generation, but maybe I'm conceptually aware of Peppa Pig. Or maybe Peppa Pig is from my generation. I don't know. It'd be weird to see like Doug in here, you know, or Hey Arnold or something. Pickle Rick, yes, is probably a big seller. Yeah, that's probably, maybe that is why they only had one left. But yeah. So then our next shot here in our recap from November is Home Slice Pizza. And actually, aliens, you may have been to this location before, but this is on North Loop also. And this is hands down my favorite pizza place. It's not necessarily my favorite pizza. I do think the pizza here is good. But that said, I don't know that it's my favorite pizza. If I could pick a slice of pizza or even like a full pizza somewhere, it might be somewhere else. But the vibes of this location are totally on point. Like it has kind of like an atmosphere of the Cheesecake Factory, not in the same sort of like architecture or design, but just in like the over the top, like, I don't know, architecture or like interior design element. It's very red on the inside. They have like almost like a Roman style like mural on the ceiling, but it's like kind of ridiculous. I can't remember exactly what it looks like, but it's not taking itself seriously. They're very much like, hey, this is a kind of almost like romantic, moody, dim lit, candle lit environment, but yet also family friendly and family oriented. It's like almost if Five Nights at Freddy was like designed for adults. I don't know. It's interesting. You could do like a whole photographic series inside this Home Slice Pizza. So I always absolutely love going here, and I always insist that we sit inside, even if there's a little bit longer wait. But what's also cool about this spot is they have a separate part of the restaurant that is just for like, hey, I'm showing up and I'm just like ordering a slice or ordering a couple slices. And then I'm going to maybe eat it there, or I'm going to just like take it to go. But it's sort of like this entirely separate by the slice to go sort of environment. And I think it works perfectly. It's like you can sit down, have the full service experience, or you can just go pick up a couple slices and eat them there in a booth, or head out and go eat them somewhere else. So super, super cool. Alien said, love home slice, used to live a block away. East Side Pies guy though. I haven't been to East Side Pies in so long. And I think the reason why is because it's basically next door to Home Slice. And so it's like, well, if I'm going to go in that spot, I'm just going to go to Home Slice, but I should try out East Side Pies. It's also been a long time since I had South Side Flying Pie, which I feel like people are kind of hit or miss on, but I always enjoyed it back in the day. But yeah, as far as this photo and why this is included in my November recap is I went with my girlfriend. We got a slice of pizza, really enjoyed the atmosphere, had a great time. It was just like really feeling the vibe, like, ooh, this is a memory that we just made here. And then we're walking out, and the restaurant is a little warm, just a hair warm, not necessarily in a bad way. But when we walked out, there was this very light breeze, and it was a little on the cooler side. And so it was like you're exiting this restaurant that maybe was just a hair warm, and you're getting hit by this wonderful cool breeze. It's not too much. It's just like the perfect amount. It's like the most iconic fall sort of breeze that you ever felt. And sort of lighting us up was this sign. And it was just like it all, the wave of atmosphere hit me all at once. And so, I always say on this channel, like I keep this little point and shoot camera with me at all times. It's always in my pocket. So I just whipped this bad boy out and zoomed it in as far as I could zoom and took a picture of the sign. And so this is just shot on a little point and shoot camera. But kind of similarly, it's like you're always trying to shoot certain things and you're not quite getting them right. But then when I did this shot, I was like, okay, I think I might have gotten a good shot this time. I think I finally nailed what I was looking for out of this sign. So yeah. And then we have a candy art one. And the video I just did last week was basically making this candy art, right? So we just saw this photograph. But why I wanted to include this one is because a lot of times when I'm shooting on the Pentax, like it's a beautiful medium format camera, love the images, but when you're working with a sensor that large, sometimes for me at least, it can be a little frustrating when you're getting shots that are super narrow in that depth of field. I know that like bokeh was king for a while, and I know like super shallow depths of field is like part of the benefit of larger sensor cameras. But I will be honest, I, in most cases, could care less about that. And really, when I'm shooting the candy art stuff, I really like getting everything in focus if I can, which is a part of the reason why I picked up the Fujifilm camera to maybe build like a tilt shift rig in the future. But when I shot this particular image, I was able to get quite a bit in focus. So you have kind of this candy shark, which is really the main item here. And this is in focus. So it's like, okay, perfect. We got what we were looking for there. And then we got the Kit Kat, where we have like the words Kit Kat are nice and sharp. And we have a Nerds cluster that's pretty sharp. And we even, maybe not quite as sharp on this Hershey's, but we got enough of it in focus. You can tell what it is. And then even the parts that did fall out of focus weren't quite as severely out of focus as it normally is. So I was like, okay, I nailed this angle, because this is an angle I typically enjoy, but I don't use often because I'm like, well, it's just going to make everything out of focus, and I hate that. And so I tend to shoot a lot of like top down lately, which is fun, but not something that you want to repeat over and over. It gets a little boring. So it was nice to be able to get this shot with the Pentax. And then in the future, we have the Fujifilm here that will kind of be doing some extensive setup to make a really complex tilt shift that we can maybe shoot more extreme angles like this, but be able to control how much is in focus and how much is out of focus. So I'm really excited for that. It's like a summer night drive with the windows open. Yes, that's in reference to this photo that we were just looking at, like the cool breeze and everything. Exactly. When the certain times of the year when both it's really hot outside, sometimes I'll lower the window and I'll blast the AC. And so I'll have like the cool AC keeping me cool, but I'll feel like warm air coming in the car. And it's like, ooh, this feels nice. And then on the flip side, when it's a little bit cooler out, sometimes I'll blast the heater and open the window and have some of the cold air coming in. But yeah, same sort of thing, like fall weather when you have some of that cooler breeze and it just like gets you feeling, I don't know, nostalgic or vibey, whatever the right thing is. I noticed when you shoot the candy, you were handheld. Is there a reason you don't use a tripod? That's a great question because, yeah, typically you should just use a tripod when you're working with, still life stuff like this. And if I am successful in setting up this Fujifilm, it's going to require having a bit more of a complex system with like a vintage lens and some tilt shift mechanism and then the camera. And that's going to become fully manual focus, which is not a big deal, but it's going to increasingly make it essentially something that is not going to be hand holdable for that stuff. But that said, pretty much every candy art image that I've done this last year, I mean, even the year before, they've pretty much all been handheld. And there's a couple reasons for that. I think here in just a little bit, we're going to start actually doing candy art live on this stream. And so you'll actually see what I'm doing in real time as I'm photographing the candy. So some of that might kind of explain why I'm hand holding it, but also a big reason is kind of twofold. One, I don't, and this is maybe embarrassing or a dumb reason, but I don't own a tripod that is tall enough to get the angles that I need for the candy art. And then adding on to that reason, I don't have, and again, I could just buy this, so I don't know why I'm being lazy about it, but I don't have I forget what you call it, but essentially like a boom arm where I can then do a 90-degree angle, top down. So I don't have a tall enough tripod, and then I don't have an arm attachment for the tripod to then shoot over the head shots. So probably at this point, something I should invest in, but that's probably the biggest reason. The second biggest reason is that I kind of like being able to rapidly change my position and be photographing and then immediately like change into a different position. And when I've used a tripod in the past, it slows me way down where it kind of feels like I'm grinding because I'm having to like totally reset up the shot. And sometimes it's those little tiny minute changes where I go, this shot sucks and this other shot that's a fraction off is beautiful. And so it's sort of like, I think ADHD that makes me, basically want to handhold it so I can always be moving a little bit. But that does have drawbacks. Luckily, when you're shooting with flash, movement of the camera isn't really a thing. Like you would think that it would be, but we're shooting at 1/25th of a second, handheld, yes, but we're also using a very bright flash. And so there's very little times where the shot is ruined by minor movements with my hand or with the camera. So yeah, but I will also say this camera is heavy. So when I'm doing a longer shoot, it becomes definitely a little bit of a problem for extended periods of holding it. Comment just came in. Your last video was very interesting with the difference of camera when shooting the candy. Yeah. So for those who didn't see, the video that just came out on Saturday was sort of a candy art comparison. Hold on, there we go. Candy art comparison of the Pentax camera, same exact shot, Pentax camera, and then also this Fujifilm camera, and then looking at the files through Lightroom. And you know, some people called out some good points with the fact that it's through Lightroom. And the more I've used Lightroom over the years, the more I've realized like it isn't truly giving you the truest form of the raw file. So I think it may be worth looking at either a different software or maybe even pulling up like, you know, the default manufacturer's version of a image processor and just sort of comparing side by side what it looks like that way. So maybe a future test could be a little more detailed in that regard and kind of steer a little bit away from Lightroom. But the reason that I've used Lightroom in the past for those comparisons is because that's the tool that I use. So it's like, well, I want to compare how it looks in the tool that I use. So it is very specific to me, but yeah. Cool. And then I think this is the last photo for the November recap. And this was actually shot with that Black Pro Mist filter and the Olympus E500. So it was shot on the same night as that video, which will be coming out on Saturday. And just another case where there's a really cool theater that is right by where the carnival was. It was in basically the same parking lot. And I've just always enjoyed their sign. This used to be an old Alamo Draft House, and I think they just maybe reused the sign. I'm not sure. But it's a budget theater now, and not maybe not the best one. Some people love it. I'm kind of indifferent to it, but the sign is really cool. So I photographed it a few times during the day, and it looks a lot like, if you guys follow the Instagram account Fuji, I think it's Fuji Hunter or Fujifilm Hunter. But he shoots a lot of signs that kind of look like this. But it was nighttime, and I thought, hey, this would be cool to test out the Pro Mist filter on this neon sign. And I don't know that it came out as hazy or what as maybe I expected that it might, but still kind of a cool shot that I wanted to include. And also we have Smile 2 on the list here, and I gotta say, pretty good movie. If you enjoyed Smile 1, I think you'll enjoy Smile 2, because I actually thought Smile 1 was like, it's fine. I don't know if I'd ever watch it again, but it was fine. Then I watched Smile 2 and I was like, I think they turned it up a little bit. I think they did better for the second one. Hardly any neon is left here in New England. They kind of got rid of all the diners and other signs, making them more colonial. Man, that kind of sucks, because I would have thought that New England area would be heavy on some neon signs, especially related to the diners. And it's like, this would get me going on a rant, but like, what is the deal with diners? Like, probably some of the coolest restaurants you can go eat at. I love a good, like, true, tin can diner. And there's hardly any in Texas, which you would think Texas seems like a diner place, like food wise. It's usually like really greasy, really heavy food. And that seems like the kind of food we love in Texas. And like, yet the best diner that we have, the only diner that we have that's like a classic diner style, is literally a Denny's. So I don't think that really truly counts as an authentic diner experience. But a lot of our diners are like Western style, so they don't have any neon, and they're just like, chicken fried steak is the only thing on the menu. But yeah, rip diners. Massachusetts has a few good diners last time I went, but that was quite a few years ago now. Upstate New York has some great diners, ones that were real train cars converted. That's really cool. Yeah, converted train cars. That's really cool. I think also like California, kind of the Route 66 area probably has a lot of diners that are still in operation, and probably also simultaneously quite a few that are no longer in operation either. But yeah, so that is, I think that's the last photo. Yeah, last photo for November recap. So just going backwards through these, we have our Southwest Theaters image. We have candy art in a good angle. We've got the Home Slice neon sign for Home Slice. Carnival shot, just a one-off. I don't think it got used in anything. And then we also have some license plates that are pretty close to Home Slice Pizza that are on North Loop as well. So, yeah. Jump back over here. I think that'll probably be the format for a lot of those videos going forward, is I'll just do the recaps as part of like the monthly live stream. But that said, I think here pretty quick, let's see, we're 7:24. Yeah, I think we're going to dive right into doing the candy art stuff that I have here. So basically what's going to happen is I'm going to walk us through creating candy art, photographing it, bringing it into Lightroom, editing it. You guys can see the whole process. It will be a little challenging for me to see comments from where I'm going to be standing, but I'm going to periodically like peer over and look at any comments that are coming in. I also do have my phone here queued up, so maybe I'll just adjust this phone so I can see them a little better. But if you guys have questions as I'm going through the creation of this candy art, absolutely feel free to throw those questions out as we go. So let me tee this up here and make sure everything's turned on. Okay. And then we got to make sure this is turned on. I have a little lav mic. Oh, also you guys can see this great new shirt that I got. Isn't that sick? I've been really getting into go-kart racing, and yeah, that's on. So I was like, ooh, I'm gonna buy this shirt because it's like a racing shirt, and I'll be sponsored by Kodak in my racing adventures. Okay. And then Alien says, that's a very cool shirt. I think so too. I'm excited about it. I am a little sad because like when you get a shirt, I feel like a lot of times I buy a shirt and I don't like it, but then you get a shirt, you put it on, it just fits perfect and it looks cool. And then you think, man, now I don't want to ever wear it because I don't want it to get ruined. I know if I put it in the washing machine, you know, the graphic is going to start peeling over time and the shirt's going to be less soft and it's going to, you know, get stains on it, things like that. And it's like, then I'm thinking, yeah, I didn't even want to, you know, wear this thing. Or then the other half of me is like, maybe I'll go buy a second one that I can keep in pristine condition and then have one that I wear more often. But yeah, I also feel like I'll find a shop and they'll, you know, there's different t-shirt brands out there and they feel different. And I'll find a shop that makes a t-shirt brand that I like. And I'm like, I'm going back, I'm ordering like a bunch more from this shop. And then I go look at all their other designs and they suck. It's like, wait, how do they have this amazing design? And then everything else is like boring and dumb. But anyway, okay, so I think we have everything set up here. So I'm going to jump us over to the other to our little studio that we have set up, and let me know if you guys can hear me all right. I'm going to be using a lav mic for this, and hopefully it works fine. But if there's any issue with the camera image or the sound quality, just let me know, and I'll be happy to figure out what I messed up. So here we go. All right, so we should be going well. I think I see the lav mic is live and not muted, so that should be good. But if it's too quiet or too loud, let me know. But we got two screens set up here. Hopefully neither one of them shut off while we're going. But we have a screen down here, which will show you guys what I am setting up on the actual table. And then you can kind of see me and what I'm doing. I did just knock over something that I was intending to photograph here as like a little test shot. So I'm going to have to reset that up. Alien says, you sound perfect. Camera is not auto-focusing on you. I set it to manual focus, but I probably did it wrong. So we'll just switch back to auto, and then it should be able to grab onto me. Hopefully it'll stay locked in the whole time, but let me know if not. So yeah, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to photograph some chocolate here that I just knocked over. I had a nice, beautiful pile. And we're going to be using the Pentax 645D. It is a freaking huge camera, and but it takes really, really great pictures. I guess I did it low. I could also just hold it up high. So we got that camera. One day I am going to buy an actual proper wireless flash for this and stop using this horrifically, set up thing. But I did have this chocolate set up. This is from the last image, but I just had this idea of maybe kind of having like a pile of chocolate, although I totally ruined it. I think it was something like that though. Okay, perfect. And normally what I'll do is I'll also come in here and I'll like wipe all this stuff down, because otherwise, if it's been sitting here for even just a few hours while you're, working or getting things set up, the problem that will happen is dust will settle on this. Little bits of candy might fall off of the candy. If you're working on it, honestly, you would think that you don't have hair follicles falling off of you constantly, but apparently I do, because every time I shoot candy art, I will find a hair follicle and be like, how am I just losing all my hair? But it'll be like an eyelash size or like a hand-sized follicle. So usually I like to wipe it down. This has been sitting here since I last did some candy art, so it might have some specks of dust. And what we can try to do is, that might be a good, sort of process when we get to the photo editing part, where I can show you when that does happen, how do I get rid of it. But when we set down this stuff, these candies, I'll actually wipe this down, and I meant to get some spray, but I forgot, so I'll have to do that at some point. But so in order to photograph this, let's say we have this set up, and this is our chocolate that we're going to photograph. I will probably look at this as like a 45-degree angle shot and less of a top-down shot, but I probably will still take the top-down shot just to see. And then maybe once we've gotten maybe what we feel like looks good, then we can, I don't know, maybe play around with like smashing up the chocolate and seeing what we can create with that. So up here, and sorry for being so backlit, but I have the light source that is really here for focusing the camera. So this is doing nothing for the final image. The flash that I'm going to shoot is so bright that it'll really overpower pretty much, I'd say 90 to 95% of what this light is providing. So this is truly just providing light either for the autofocus, or when I'm manually focusing, it's just providing light so I can see what I'm doing basically. So that's all this does. We have, and this is probably going to be a little bit challenging to see, but a really giant soft box here. Yep. Hi. So yeah, we have this giant soft box, and I only use the small diffuser. So you notice like there is room here for more diffusing, but I just use the very small inside one. And then on the back here, oh, I'm hitting the fan. All I've got is this flash. So it is just a pretty standard flash. This is a Godox V860 Mark II for Sony cameras because I used to have Sony cameras. It's kind of a goal of mine in 2025 to purchase a like higher quality, more powerful light, especially since I don't even have a camera that can use this flash anymore. But when you're using a wireless system, you can just shoot that from anything and still activate it. So we'll be at full power on this flash, and we're going to be setting it up basically where I was just sitting for the first part of the live stream. Assuming the lights are LED and not hot enough to melt the chocolate. Yeah, that's a good call out. Yeah, they are LED. This one is honestly very underpowered. I kind of regret buying it, but I originally bought it for better lighting for the YouTube videos. So this is it's a Amarin 60D bi-color light. So the benefit there was that I can change the color balance for YouTube videos, which tend to be a little bit warmer. And then I could then also change the white balance on this light to be the same as my flash, which the flash is locked at, I think, 5700 Kelvin. So I can set this to 5700 Kelvin and just have them perfectly match. But then when I do the YouTube stuff, I can adjust it down to like 4600 Kelvin. And that was the benefit, but the cost there was that you get less power when it's a bi-color light. So unfortunately, it's not as powerful as I would have hoped. So maybe in the future, I'll get like a stronger flash and a stronger light here, but it's a small space. So I don't know that I would really want to invest in a whole lot more. But yeah, definitely LED, doesn't get too hot in here. I also run the fan just to keep me cool because a lot of times I'll start getting hot. So let me set up this flash. I'm also going to take a little sippy of some tea. I can already tell you having a sore throat and talking a lot on stream was maybe not my best decision, but it is what it is. So you guys can't see me, but you should be able to hear me. And I am setting up the flash now. Unfortunately, this is a small room, so we don't get to maybe put the flash as far away as we would hope. And there's a really low-hanging ceiling fan in here, so we also don't get to really put the flash up as high as we maybe would want. And just depending on the candy will kind of depend on how high or really like what angle I'm putting the flash at. But I try to keep it, I would say, about over an arm's length away from me. So it's probably about 3 to 4 feet away from me / the subject. So yeah, it would be ideal if I could get it even further away and just turn up the power a little bit, but is what it is. And then, so we have our light, we've got our flash set up, and I always like to get low and check the angle and make sure the flash is actually pointed in the way that I want. All right. And then I always keep another thing here, which is a massive step ladder. This was like one of my prized possessions, and it was like my first like classic adult buy, where you buy a lot of adult things when you become an adult, obviously, but every once in a while you get excited about it, and it's like, as a kid, I would never have cared about a step ladder. Like, that just would never have been on my radar. I would have had no preference. I would not have thought about it beyond just, oh, I need to use one real quick. But now that I've become an adult, I definitely did a little bit of shopping around to find a really good step ladder, and specifically in person, so I could try it out and like really. And so then I bought this one, and I was like, I'm going to put some money down. I'm going to get a good step ladder. And this is like my favorite adult possession that's in this apartment, which is so funny. But I think we all have that, like a thing that we bought that as kids we would not have cared about, but as an adult, I'm like, I'm so excited. I've got this step ladder. But yeah, it's great. It's very stable. It has 3 steps, and it has a nice, good rubber grip, and it's really, really solid. And so I love it. So what I use this for a lot, I'll show you here, is I will often, for our top-down shots, this is how I would do the top-down shot. So I would take my camera, and I would turn everything on. And then for the top-down stuff, this is a 120 millimeter lens. So you do have to be pretty far away from the subject, which is a bit challenging in this space. To be honest, like maybe a 90 millimeter or 85 millimeter would probably work better for this space. But this lens is so sharp, it's absolutely worth it. But yeah, what I would typically do, you guys will get to see my nice athletic attire. But I would get way up here, try not to chop my head off on the fan that's literally spinning right next to me. And then basically come in just right next to this. This light source ends up being always in my way, but there's no further to the side that it can go. And so I kind of just sort of squeeze myself in here and then peek through the viewfinder. And then a lot of times if I'm manually focusing, I will hold the lens like this so that I can basically hold it in place and also adjust the focus and then basically fire the shot. Sometimes I will use autofocus, but unfortunately, depending on what I'm shooting, that's not always a reliable route to go. So we would lock that in for manual focus, come up high, do our zooming, not really zooming, our focusing, and then fire the shot. And we have to be pretty far away. And so that's where this step stool comes into place. But for this particular part of today, I think we're going to do it from more of like a 45-degree angle. Sometimes I'll still use the step stool to be at 45 degrees, but just be a little bit higher up on 45 degrees. But we're going to start without the stool first and work our way into the stool. So when I turn all this stuff on, the proper way to do it is to first turn on the camera. And then once the camera is turned on, we then turn on this flash wireless sync. And for those who don't know, the reason this looks so weird is because this flash sync is designed for Sony cameras. This is a Pentax camera. They're not compatible. And when I tried to slide this flash in, it was way too tight to be comfortable. I was like, I'm clearly going to damage the little tiny metal pins. So I came up with this weird adapter. It's like 2 different adapters to basically create a cradle for this flash to sit in. And then this camera has a PC port and this flash has a PC port. So I'm basically actually sending the info from the camera via this cable into the flash. So it's not actually communicating via the hot shoe. But cool. So we have our flash trigger turned on. And then what I'll do is I'll go back here and I'll turn on the actual flash, give it a second to charge up. And then I always just verify that it is set correctly, that it's set to 1/1, so full power, and that it has all the other settings correctly enabled. And so now, take our lens cap out. Always check, make sure you don't have too much debris on the lens. Even if you have the lens cap on, sometimes that stuff is pretty sneaky and it'll get in there. And since, you know, in most cases, it's probably not going to show up in your photo, but we're going to be shooting at an aperture somewhere between 11 and 16. And so it is a little bit more possible for that to show up. In this case, it would probably show up more as a sort of like shadow on the image. It probably wouldn't show up as like a physical item, but sometimes you never know. So cool. We've got that looking clean and nice. So now we're going to do a little test shot here. And also important to know, we've turned off all the other lights. The only lights that are still on in this room have also been set to the proper white balance. So even if there is any other light on, it's not going to impact the photo. The other lights are also too weak, so they're not really going to impact anything. Cool. So I'm going to take one shot here real quick. And then interesting thing about this camera is we now have to wait 12 seconds for the image to actually be processed and saved to the camera. And then at some point, it's going to show up here. Oh, there we go. So there's our image. 12 seconds is not as long as it sounds, but it sometimes can feel a bit long. So looking at this image here, it looks like we're blowing out the highlights a little bit. So this is a little bit high on the exposure, and that's because I didn't realize I must have bumped and knocked it down to F8. Like I said, we really want to be probably around F11 or F13, maybe F16, but that's probably pushing it. We're starting to get into some nasty laws of physics at that point for what we're doing here. The Pentax uses contrast detect focus. Actually, surprisingly, I think this Pentax uses phase detect. It's just that there's not very many focus points. But I do find that this Pentax camera, autofocus wise, is pretty quick and pretty reliable. But when you are working with a subject where the background is just a few millimeters lower than the subject itself, sometimes it won't be sure what to focus on and it'll just focus on the background. And that will provide just enough softness to the top of the candy to be noticeable, in my opinion. So I have to sometimes shoot manually because of that. But yeah, this camera, I believe, Pentax 645D has phase detect. So let's take this shot again. I've kind of gone the other extreme, and I've dialed down. Settings wise, we are at 1/25th of a second, which is the maximum shutter speed for this camera to still sync with a flash in the regular mode. And then we're at f13, and then we're at ISO 200. Sometimes I'll bring it down to ISO 100, but you do actually get a little bit more dynamic range when you have a slightly higher ISO on this camera. So this camera is so good with ISO performance, or as someone on YouTube told me recently that I sounded dumb, ISO performance is how I guess you're supposed to pronounce it. Yeah, you won't notice the added noise. Okay, I'm gonna take another shot here. This is a really close-up one. Okay, we got our time. I keep putting it too far. But yeah, here's our, waiting for it to process. There we go. So that's how long you have to wait per image. If you fill the buffer, it's about a minute before you can review the image. But this is looking a lot better. I think this is perfectly exposed. I am going to try one at a slightly higher f-stop just to see how I like it. And we'll take a look at this one next. Pentax uses DNG RAW and PEF RAW. Have you seen any difference? That's a great question. I use PEF RAW. I think when I first got the camera, I did a few stuff with the DNG RAW, but to be honest, I haven't done it in so long. And I just went with PEF RAW because I think I read somewhere that was like the better version. Like it was a better amount of data that it collected or something. So I just went that route. But that would be interesting to do like a little comparison between the same files within the camera. So looking at these two, I'm going to go with the slightly brighter image. I'm going to go with F11. So what we have is, settings-wise, we're at full power on the flash. We're at 125th of a second for the shutter speed. We're at F11, and we're at ISO 200. And that is kind of the sweet spot here. For this lens, F11 is razor sharp. So there's no need to worry about trying to shoot at like F8 or something like that. So yeah, let me get a couple more shots here. And I like to kind of play around. I'll bust out my stool, and then I'll do a few where I'm at like a little bit higher angle. And I'll also kind of play around with where the focus point is being placed. And I'll try not to chop my head off as I come up here. You know, hopefully I will probably be moving in a few months. And so when I move, hopefully I can find a place with a little bit better ceiling setup, or maybe I'll just finally rent a studio space for cheap and be able to like set up something a little bit more permanent. But not having to worry about chopping off my head would be really, really just a special thing, you know? Okay, and then I do want to shoot, when I got up there really high, the top down shot actually looked like it could be maybe kind of cool. So I am going to go ahead and do that. Now I will say one thing with this lens and camera is that sometimes when you have a less easily contrasting subject, this lens will just go for extremes. It'll zoom all the way out, well, I say zoom, but it'll focus all the way out, focus all the way back in, and never make it. But it's not quite hunting. It's just like it's got no freaking clue. And you almost have to just stop, let it stop, point at something else, refocus, and go back. Because otherwise it'll just sit there and do it over and over and over. Even if you release the shutter and put it and click the shutter again, it just will not be able to handle it. So that's one downside. If you hear a lot of mechanical sounds, you'll know that's it doing its thing. I'm going to do a few that are kind of a little bit more vertical style. Unfortunately, the buffer on this camera fills quickly, so I try to always slow my process down a little bit. So I'm going to let it sit for just a second to clear that buffer so I can see kind of what we got. And I do ultimately want to get a couple more. And I don't know, what do you guys think? Would y'all prefer I smash this chocolate and photograph that? Or do y'all want me to clear off the chocolate and go ahead and start doing the candy gummy bears? I guess I'd have to find something. Actually, you know, well, we'll see what you guys say. But there may be a benefit to doing, not smashing it, because then we don't have to clean it up. The top-down shot isn't as good as I thought it was. There's just too much shadow. I mean, it might be fun. We'll look at it in the file, but I definitely think these like side angles, these are fun. Yeah, that one's really cool. Okay. There's some stuff for us to play around with for sure. So let me get just a couple more vertical shots and then we can move on here. Sometimes I also notice with this camera, what you see in the viewfinder doesn't always line up perfectly. And so sometimes you have to kind of factor in that there's going to be a little bit more visible image than what you're seeing in the viewfinder, and that sometimes when you think you have something perfectly centered, you look at it later and it's not perfectly centered and you're like, wait, how's that happening? But it's always in the same area where there's a little extra. So, you know, that's part of learning your camera and just knowing where to shoot, or just reviewing the files and then being like, okay, I messed up. So let's see, that's looking good. Sometimes also the shadow that gets cast can kind of confuse. Oh yeah, some of these are a little off to one side. A little bit of a glare. That could be cleaned up. Okay. So let me get... Now, Aliens for Humans, if you're still watching, I wonder if you have a good Italian restaurant recommendation for the area. Okay. So I think we got what we wanted here. Is there a reason for the red background, or do you like it with the candy? Yeah. So eat the chocolate and do the hard candy. Yeah, the red background was specific for this shoot that I was doing before with the blue sharks and everything. Like, I just thought that the red background would make the chocolate look a little more rich and then would kind of like contrast the blue sharks really well. So that's why we went with the red backdrop. And then when I was pulling out the candy or this candy, the gummies for the shoot today in the live stream, I was kind of thinking about it's, you know, holiday themed, so red and green are kind of like your two main holiday colors, and I don't have a great green backdrop, otherwise I probably would have used that. But red being a really solid color for kind of the Christmas / holiday time period. And then also another big factor is there really isn't any strong red candy in this mix, but there is some strong green candy in this mix. So if I had paired that with a green background, there'd be a little bit of a risk of losing some of the candy in the background versus having it all kind of pop and be a little bit more visual. So that's the best reason I can give for the red backdrop. But I think we have what we want. I'm actually not going to smash the chocolate. I'm just going to gently push it aside here. Maybe I'll revisit it. It actually all stayed together. Perfect. And then let me very quickly grab some paper towels. Okay, and we're just going to spray a little bit of cleaner on here. Always makes the post-processing much easier if you have a clean surface to work on, because then You don't have to spend as much time editing out little bits of dust and dirt. You'll still have some, but I mean, shoot, it'll be like night and day difference. Some of the times where I forgot to clean it, spent more time just removing dust particles than I did actually editing any photos. So that looks pretty good. So now, put our camera aside here for a moment. And now we're going to set up our candy. Wow, okay, that smells good. And it almost, okay, it smells like Sprite. It smells like Sprite. Like I almost even smell the carbonation. There's like a definite like lemon lime kind of smell. There's also maybe a little bit more smell to it, so it might be like a Sprite remix or something. Wow, that's incredible. I wish I could send like smells over the live stream. I almost just want to sit here and smell that the whole time. Okay, so now we need to place candy on this backdrop here. And when you're working with candy, it's never going to be perfect. And occasionally, I lost my camera here. Let me flip this back on. Occasionally, you're going to get candy that does look good, and you're going to get a lot of candy that does not look good. And so you're going to have to sort of, either buy a bunch of the same bag of candy, which I've done before. Like if I really know that there's going to be a high amount of candy that doesn't look good, I'll buy multiple bags so I can at least get enough really good looking candy. But in this case, we only have the 110. So we'll also not be overly perfectionist with the candy that we're getting. But as an example, we have this piece of candy. Let's see if I can get it in focus here. There we go. So this little piece of candy has some significant, like, there's like holes and stuff in it. It looks weird. So it looks really, really bad. I don't know if this one is a better way of showing it. But yeah, it's just not in a good shape. So that's the kind of candy that we toss aside and oftentimes that we eat. Not sure what that smell is. This one also just has no image on it at all. It's literally just basically plain. They left off the candy. Oh wait, he's on the back. Never mind. This one's actually pretty good. Let's see if we can move this light over a little bit. So yeah, this is a good one. He's got all of his things he's supposed to have. So I'm going to go through, especially on the gingerbread men, because they have faces and bodies. They're probably going to be kind of like the more important part of this image. So I'm basically making 3 piles off camera because I need this space. But I'm basically making piles for absolute rejects, and then a pile of these guys are not great, so I don't want to use them in any of the center part of the shot, but I do want to hold them on reserve in case I don't have enough and I need to go back and use some of these that are maybe not as ideal. Yeah, that one's not too good. So I'm just kind of picking through. This one looks like it has leprosy, so that's not too good. And, ooh, this one's a good one. And that's really, I'm being a little bit picky on the gingerbread men just because they're, I don't know, I feel like they're more formed and defined. And as far as this kit goes, everything else in here is like a gumdrop. So this is the only one that stands out a little different. This is interesting. This one looks like it kind of has a heart that it's holding. It's supposed to be like the buttons and the bow tie, but it looks like it's just like it's holding its own heart. So that one's not going to make it. Rip. This one, I'm going to put it in the good pile. Wash your hands before you put all your filthy fingers over candy, and then make sure you don't offer it to your guests. This one's okay. I'll put him in the... Ooh, oh, this guy's not too good. Okay, so we have about 7, maybe 8 that are good, and that's going to be, I think, plenty. So now, with the other ones, like these little gumdrop style, I'll just make sure that there's nothing like really bad about them, but I'm not going to be as like picky with these. And so basically now we're just going to start laying them out, and I'm going to start with probably the best looking gingerbread man. And I'm going to kind of think about where is the center of this shot going to be. It's probably going to be right there. So that's our starting guy. First one down, most important. And then we're basically just going to start putting in all of the other ones. And we're going to be thinking about texture, color. You know, here we have 3 green ones, but they're all slightly different in terms of the design that they have. So we want to make sure we have a good mix of designs and a good mix of colors. We don't want 3, 4 different blue ones all next to each other. So we need to be kind of intentional with how we're spreading these out. And we also want them, or I do, I say we, but this is what I want. I want them to be a little bit kind of mixed up. I don't want them to look like they were placed down in a perfect pattern. I want them to look like they just sort of randomly fell on this backdrop. And there is also an element of how close or how far away we're putting these guys. If they're too close, the image is going to feel cluttered and too tight. But if they're too far away, then the image is going to feel way too spaced out. So you're trying to find that perfect balance. And sometimes you don't really know the perfect balance until you look at it in camera. And we're taking our sweet time here. I think I'll put this guy straight down. The other thing worth noting is with these gummies, they're going to leave a stain. Now, if this were a paper backdrop, it would leave a terrible stain that would be really annoying, and you would not be able to reuse the paper. This is a, like, I don't know, plastic or some kind of cleanable backdrop, so we are able to actually go in and wipe it down so it's not lost if we need to move stuff. But with that in mind, we do also want to make sure that we're not putting too many things down and having to move too much stuff, because then we're having to really like wipe and clean, and that can slow us down. So one bummer, I'm not seeing a ton of these like really beautiful blue ones in here. So, and the ones that I did get seem to all be the exact same one. So that's kind of a bummer. But that means we'll just want to space those out a little bit more. A lot of these have an A on the top. Is that like the brand name here? Jolly Gingerbread Gummies. Wait. This is Jolly Gingerbread Gummies. What the heck? Jolly Gingerbread Gummies. Or is that how you spell gummies? Am I just dumb? I would not put it past me to just actually be dumb. And it looks like we have some bandwidth issues, so apologies for that. Not sure what's going on there. We have a nice, beautiful blue one I'm going to stick right here. And we haven't done too many yellow ones, so I'll put another yellow one there. And then let's get a gingerbread man over here. And definitely one down here. And maybe let's hold on to these other ones. I don't want to use up too many gingerbread men right away. So we'll put a green one here. And if they're not looking too perfect, I'm going to set them aside. Let's see, we don't have too many orange. Let's find a good orange one. That one's pretty good. And then we have this pink one we'll put up here. And, ooh, that's a good yellow. Put that down here. So basically just going in, kind of sticking these down, looking at what colors we've already put down, what colors we have yet to do, what patterns we have yet to do. Could do a nice purple one there. Maybe the green one here. The package of misfit candy. Yeah, that's true. And there are some times where you'll just get like an entire package where you're like, oh, this is basically not usable, any of this. Okay, let's see. I think I guess we haven't done this green one too many times. We'll stick that here. And we'll put the purple one. Definitely want to incorporate a blue down here so we get all the blue ones are a little bit more spread out. And then let's see. So we have a good mix so far, except for this. We need more of that shade of red, but it actually looks like there's only one more. Two more. They're both in pretty good shape. Whoa! Jumped right out of my hand. You saw it. You all saw it. Okay, so I'm starting to build a wall here, and I don't want that to separate the gingerbread men. I'm actually going to pull this guy up, try to make sure there's no oil stains, and I'm going to put this gingerbread man here. And I don't know, that's looking a little bit too crunched, actually, so we're going to clean it. And we don't eat the gummies after we're done that we used most of the time. Sometimes I'm bad. But, you know, we got our filthy hands on it. We're touching them, moving them around. So we'll try to eat just the rejected ones only. Ooh, there's another hidden gingerbread man in here, and he's in good shape. He's looking solid. No, please. Don't worry, buddy. So I also need to think about how high. If we're shooting down, we probably want to put a couple up high. I'm going to put him over here. I'm going to put this guy up high. And I'm going to put this guy, I think, down low. So that is all of our gingerbread men. And so basically now we just need to fill it in with all of our little gumdrop things. And hopefully we like how we put all this down. But the nice thing about these is that these will be pretty easy to adjust if we need to. See, do we have, okay, we have at least one more blue that looks good, so I'll put that aside. I'll put that here. I think we need a few more orange and green. See if we have any interesting green ones. That one's interesting. Put it right there. So there's actually looking like there's probably more. I gotta try one of these. That was absolutely delicious. That was the highlight of my whole day, right there. Okay. Purple. That's what we're missing here. We don't have too many purple, so let's get some purple on the map. Boom. I try so hard not to be a perfectionist with this, but it is difficult. No, that one looks like shit. Okay, we're going to do that one over. There's actually 3 different shades of the red one, which is interesting. Did not realize that. Maybe a boom, boom. Sometimes I'll set these up and it'll be way too far under this light, and then it'll be like, well, great, now it's going to be pain. So I always have to try to remember, set this up a little over so you have room to get the camera up there. All right, are you guys seeing any imbalances here? You're seeing any that look like they should or shouldn't? Do we need any more of a specific color? I think we could do another blue one. I'm going to put a blue one over here, but I feel like a gingerbread man could really go there. So I'm going to pick from our rejected pile. Sometimes the rejects, or not the reject, but the semi-reject. So sometimes the semi-rejected pile, they'll just have one little thing that's wrong, and you can maybe put it to the outside, and so it's like cutting off part of the gingerbread man that doesn't look too good. So I'm going to stick a guy right here. Perfect. And then we'll stick in a blue one. Actually, let's do this blue one. That looks better. And then maybe some more yellow on this side. Got any good yellow? Yeah, that's a good yellow. Boom. We say boom here. We don't worry about it. Okay. Well, do another yellow up here. And maybe one more yellow like right there. And then let's get another orange. But we have not done any of these in orange. So let's do that and that. Wonderful. Looking good. It's coming together. Oh, there's another gingerbread man hiding under here, and he actually looks not too shabby. So let's see. I think maybe we'll put him down here. Maybe way down here. Actually, let me wipe the grease off. Okay, and then we'll put him way down. And we'll reposition that as well. Perfect. I love it. Got a couple good ones. That one, no. No. Yes. Okay. Probably do this one here. And that one there. Gotcha. So yeah, a little bit of a slow process. That's why usually in the videos I always speed this part up and make it a little bit quicker. I think we could definitely use some more green ones. So let's get some green ones rolling. You guys have any Christmas plans? Holiday plans? What are you guys doing? I will be headed out of town for me, which I'm excited for. I think we need a few more purple in here too, if we have any that still look okay. A lot of these are deformed as heck. Yeah, we got a few. Okay. What am I seeing? What am I missing? Maybe another blue guy way up in the top corner. Maybe he makes it in, maybe he doesn't. Who knows? A couple more orange ones. I think I got two good orange ones right here. So, do an orange one there and there. No! Change my mind. I'll put the orange one over there. And we're going to put a... Now we are starting to get to the kind of bottom of the barrel. A lot of these are rejected ones I've just picked up and thrown down multiple times for various reasons. Put like a pink one here. And I always like to try to make sure the shape isn't like too weird one way or another, so that when I'm framing up the shot I can get good clean images. And also I like to go beyond the boundaries of what I'm intending to shoot, so that if I accidentally move too far to one side or the other, I won't run out of candy in the shot. Because sometimes I'll have just a beautiful shot, but it's like, oh, there's a little bit of dead space at the top or at the bottom, and now I feel like this shot's useless to me. I can't unlock my own thing. Okay, let's see. We got some other stuff here. Sorry, I was freaking zoned in. We have Colton's Photography Studio and Candy Shop. Just think of the sponsorships. I know. Honestly, I have thought about that. I don't really do Oh! I dropped one. There's grease on the backdrop. We got to fix it. This is what I get for multitasking. Okay. So yeah, I have thought about that. It was like, there are some local candy shops here in town that they just have like a lot of really unique, weird candy. And it's like, I would love to shoot that, but also you guys are charging a lot for it. And, I could, maybe we set up something. Let me photograph the candy. I'll give it back to you. And you can, I don't know, use the images or something. But I don't really do much in the way of like sponsored stuff, because it kind of stresses me out, man. It's like, now I got to have deliverables, and I used to live in that world of creating content for others, and I didn't enjoy it too much, which is why I stopped doing it. That, and I wasn't very successful on the business side. I can admit that. But yeah, that's why I don't usually have sponsorships. Every once in a while someone hits up the channel to do like a sponsored thing or something, and I'm just like, yeah, nah, not really, especially when it's like, essentially it's an ad. It's like, I'm not really here to be a business. I'm just here to have fun and be motivated to make art and whatnot. So it's like, we don't need the sponsorship deals. Maybe one day if someone has a compelling one, but otherwise, this dang phone keeps turning off. I do not like that. This is how I'm seeing your comments. Okay. Timothy says, clean HDMI out. No, not really. I mean, I guess it is. Yeah, I mean, it's coming straight out of the HDMI. For this kind of talking head one, the one that is actually showing the candy is a bit messed up. It's going through like a monitor and then into the computer. Just having the family together for Christmas Day with a brunch planned. Ooh, what kind of brunch? Obviously, I won't know the restaurant based on the name, but like, what type of food is it? I love brunch, man. There's no better invention than brunch. It's perfect. Seems the candy should be in the main view. Mistake or ego? Hey, you know what? That's a good question. We can switch it. I do have the capacity to switch, but part of that was really because once I start shooting it, it's a little easier to like see the actions I'm doing and to like kind of explain everything. But yeah, dang, the rest of these are all messed up, guys. I didn't want to pay for a second box. I cheaped out, man. And now I'm paying the price. But I think mostly what I'm setting up at this point is beyond the confines of where the actual image is going to be. I'm actually going to change this one for a gummy. Do I have a better looking one? I do. He's just kind of twisted. He's got his leg kicked up. Oh, that's bothering me. Actually, I'm going to switch to someone else. Who else do we have? Maybe this guy. That's better. The kicked up leg guy, he's relaxing. And then maybe I'm going to put a one up here in the top, just in case. Sometimes you have too many gingerbread men and then the rest is like an outline with nothing. So We'll do that. And we'll put a few more here, just some of the rejected ones, just in case. Sometimes you can fix the rejected ones in post also, which is not ideal. Takes too much time. I don't like doing it. But sometimes you got to do what you don't want to do. And we also have to look at this and say, are these too close on some sides? Do they need to be spaced out a little more? And sometimes you don't know until you take the photo and then you say, oh, now I can see where I've gone wrong. This path has led me astray. Okay, we're just going to stick a couple more here, and then we're going to start taking pictures. And I may have to taste one more of these. I'm going to taste a green one. I think I like the first one better, but I wish I could bag this smell up. That's a good smell, man. Okay. Yeah, my photography is more of a semi-paid hobby right now, and I like it. That's good. Yeah, there's so many people who are doing photography for money and they're enjoying it. And I mean, that was me too at times, but there's just too many times where I wasn't enjoying it. And so when I reconnected with the art side, I think that resonated with me a little bit more for me personally. But yeah, nothing wrong with making a little money with something that you do as long as you enjoy it. Okay, I think we got something to work with here. I'm just going to put one more orange here and one more orange there to really kind of fill it out. Boom. All right, so we've laid out our candy, and now what we'll do is we'll kind of clean this up a little bit, move these aside. And yeah, everything else looks good. And so now we'll resume taking some photos. So for something like this, a top-down shot is going to be kind of like the main shot I'm thinking of. And then some varying degrees of how close. We'll also do a few angled shots. And again, we're actually going to keep settings the same here. So we're going to run 125th of a second for the shutter. And then we're going to run f11. And we're going to be at ISO 200 at full power on the flash. Uh-oh, we got loser here. Whoa, look what I just lucked into. Colton making his breakfast. Yes, all is well. Yeah, I've already eaten a couple of them, but luckily we have plenty of, well, luckily or unluckily, we have plenty of rejects. I'd rather be at a deficit of rejects. All right, here we go. So I'm going to start with the top-down shot because that's the first one I was thinking of for this. So we've got our beautiful adult stool here, our step ladder. And what I'm going to do real quick is fire a test shot to make sure that the exposure is still going to look right. And so we'll have our 12-second pause here for station identification. And then if it looks good, we'll start rocking and rolling. Yeah, I think these guys are looking good. There's one guy that's got his leg kicked up, and that could be an issue because of how the flash is set up, where it might kind of cast a weird shadow that we might not like. Ooh, yeah, this looks weird, man. One of these blue ones are actually catching like way more light than the others, and so they're popping way more than the others do, which almost makes it look like it's like I photoshopped it in on the LCD screen. I don't know if you guys would be able to see, but it kind of looks like it pops out in a weird way. So that'll be interesting to know if that's going to be a problem. Okay, so we climb up to the tippy top of the mountain, and then we're going to have to get up on our tippy toes, which is not always great. Oh my God. All right, I'm already falling. So Sometimes that happens. I get too in the zone here. This is not the safest route to go. Okay. Zoom in on our boy. And so for me, the gingerbread man is going to be the kind of subject of this. So I'm really focusing on that. And we'll have to check in Lightroom if the focus is how we want it, because sometimes it's not. And we may have to switch to manual focus. Okay. And then we'll maybe get a tighter shot here. Now this lens, as you focus, it actually does change the field of view. It's almost like a zoom lens. So you may have to reset a couple times to get the field of view that you're looking for. Okay. So we're gonna have to wait like a whole minute for these to save to the card so we can see what we got. So Christmas brunch. Did we ever find out what kind of Christmas brunch we're having? We didn't, not yet. That news is gonna drop. All right, let's see what we got. Okay. Looking pretty good. Oh, I think we lost connection again. This camera likes to turn itself off, but that's what we're getting so far. Really testing the minimum focusing distance of this lens. But yeah, it's got a nice little shadow cast. Now the one downside is over here in the corner, it's darker, and that's an issue with this camera, but also because of where I was standing, I wasn't thinking about that. And so I was probably physically blocking part of the flash. So sometimes when I'm in this kind of shot, I have to like stand weirdly so that I'm not interfering with the flash. All problems due to the fact that this is such a small studio space, if you can even really call it that. So what we'll do is we'll get back into position and I'll scrunch over as far as I can and I'll kind of twist my body. So instead of standing like this, I'll twist like that so that I'm not blocking the flash too much. And then we'll shoot it again. Let's go in, let's see, the blue one, yeah. And yeah, this is really where the tripod would come into play, but see, I'm changing so many times how close or how far away I am, or exactly what angle I'm at, or maybe even which of the candies I'm photographing, and so it makes it hard to do a tripod for this sort of thing. For me personally, this is, personal problem. Many personal problems, but that's one of them. You know how it goes. We all have our things. Homemade brunch. Quiche. Okay, my girlfriend makes a mean quiche. And I was not a big quiche eater before. And then I tried her quiche and I was like, wow, I'm so sold on this. Prior to that, my only knowledge of what a quiche really was from the TV show Ed, Edd and Eddy. So didn't have a lot of knowledge at that point. Quiche, French toast, baked casserole. Oh, that sounds good. Bacon, sausages, meatballs, and all the other fixings. We have not set a menu yet. Dang, for having not set a menu, that sounds like a pretty good menu right there. I like that. Okay, so see what we got here. Ooh, yeah, that's looking good. Now, the only downside is, well, I guess we did get a good further back shot. But you kind of have to check all the edges, make sure that there's not a section where it's like, okay, yeah, there was still candy, but you don't really see it, and so it actually looks like there's dead space. So you have to make sure there's no dead space and that things aren't too far spaced out or too closely spaced, or a mix where like a cluster of them's really close and everything else is spread out and it looks uneven. So sometimes you have to go in and reshoot, but I think this actually looks pretty well spaced for the most part. I think we'd have to like radically change this if we wanted to adjust it further. So now I'm going to shoot a couple of these at a more of an angle. And it looks like so far they're all in focus. So that's good. We may be able to use autofocus this time. What about hanging a gimbal head inverted on the tripod? Would that give you the stability and the flexibility that you want? So, you know, possibly, for sure. I mean, that's definitely an idea. The stability doesn't seem to be much of an issue, though. Well, I mean, my stability is an issue, but the camera itself, I don't really get much camera shake because of the intensity of the flash. And I'll do typical, like, maybe not every time, but typical breathing things of like, okay, let me breathe out, let me breathe in, and then let me get to where I can be super still for a second, like get really tight, put my arms into my sides, and then fire the shot. And that seems to work perfect. So I don't really get too much shake. But this camera does not have, but yeah, mostly it's the flash. The flash is sort of freezing it and saving us there. This could be interesting. And I do have to remember not to only shoot horizontal shots. We need to also get a few vertical shots. Ooh, I don't like that one. Do a vertical one that's higher up. I was just telling the others, though, it'd be nice not to have a ceiling fan right above my head. Ooh, there's a little dead zone there I don't like. Okay. And I'd like to do a few, I'll be kind of out of camera range, but like a few further back. And then I'll also do a few that are like really macro. Get like really close up to them. Oh God, my face is so close to this fan. I guess I've never stood right in this spot before. Okay. Well, I guess I didn't do any wide. And I think the flash is getting a little bit tired because I notice if I shoot too many in a row, I'm missing a couple shots. So the flash is getting a little bit exhausted, but not too much yet. So I think really the top-down shot is what's going to work best for this, but always good to grab a couple. And sometimes it's just fun to like play around with getting really close or really far back, or shooting. Like a lot of times I'll find a really sweet angle shooting kind of from over here where you're getting even more of like a side profile based on where the flash is hitting. And sometimes that can look like really cool. So yeah, we'll just kind of do the routine of the normal the normal ones. But yeah, from like this angle, sometimes this angle just works. That's a tough angle though for the gingerbread man because he's so flat that when you hit that focus point, it's very likely that the top or bottom of that gingerbread man that's in focus will also be out of focus, and I hate that. So, cool. Let me take a quick look at what we've got. This is still saving. Never turn this camera off while it's still saving. Let's see. Bunk bed, set up on the bottom bunk and lie on the top and shoot down. Maximum comfort and convenience. That's actually not a bad idea. Maybe have to do a world's first bunk bed photography. Okay. I actually have someone who is going to purchase the E300. So I hate to say it, but the E300 is getting sold, which makes me a little sad to say, but it's like I'm keeping the E500 and they basically are the same camera. The E300 does look cooler, but the E500 is far more practical. So, yeah, sad as it is. I could never shoot candy. I am so hungry right now. Yeah, honestly, that is one of the hardest parts of shooting candy, is not eating it all. For a while there in the middle of the year, when I was like photographing the candy almost every day, and I was eating a lot of it. And there was also, I will admit, times where I would buy some candy to photograph, but I'm not going to do it for like a day or so. And then I'm, playing some video games or doing something, and I'm like, ooh, I got that candy in the pantry, and I'd go eat it. And like, great, I just ate my subject. I have to go buy it all over again. But man, I gained a few pounds during the first half of this year doing that. And then I had a natural sort of not shooting the candy as much, and I kind of went on like a sugar-free couple months here these last like 2 or 3 months where I basically have not eaten much sugar, and I've dropped like 10 pounds. So I have I gained like 10 pounds eating my subject, which is ridiculous. So it is a workplace hazard to photograph candy. Ooh, that does look cool though. Okay, and we are going to see these, so don't worry, you will see them. We're going to import them into Lightroom and take a look. I think a few of these could be a bit brighter, but that also is hard to gauge just off of the camera itself. Okay, let me do 2 more shots, and then we're going to edit what we have, and I may continue to photograph this stuff because I can get a little bit of perfectionist about it, but I don't want this to take too long. So we're going to edit what we have up to this point. Where's that guy? There it is. Cool. Usually I'll also take like 2 shots. That way if one was out of focus or did have some camera shake, then it won't be too bad. I'll have like a second copy. I don't know why I said it won't be too bad. It would be bad, but I would have a second copy that I could look at. You're also Secretary General of the E500 Depreciation Society. No way you're giving up on that prestige. Yeah, definitely not. The actual Saturday's, the video coming out on Saturday is featuring the E500. So it's been a while since I had it on the channel. Have you shot fruit slices? They have half circle shape and they sometimes have different colored edges. I think it depends. I think there is like a specific fruit slices like candy, but then there's also candy that are various fruit slices that might not be what you're referring to. I've definitely photographed, there's a package from Trader Joe's that has a bunch of different candy and there's some like watermelon slices. I've done that. And then I did like a fruit, like a orange slices one. But you might be referring to something else because I feel like that's ringing a bell for me, but I can't think of what it is. Okay, let me take one peek here. I think we have at least enough to like stop and look, because you can easily spend too much time photographing, then jump over to Lightroom and say, oh shoot, I've had a setting messed up the whole time that I forgot, or none of these are looking right. I need to like make an adjustment. So before we spend any further energy, what we'll do now is we'll jump back over to the computer, import this into Lightroom, and see what we have so far. So let me jump over there. It looks like the other camera here froze, so let me restart that. Where's that plug? Okay. I know, super compelling footage. Whoo! So let's see, did that fix this other camera? It did not. I'm a talking head man here, but no proper footage. Let's see. This happened last time too, so I don't know. Maybe this cam link thing that I have is no good. Shoot. How did I fix it last time? Okay, cam link. You're doing me dirty here. Dang, this thing's really frozen. That's weird. Even changing the device doesn't work. Oh, there it goes. Okay, that worked. Let me try changing it back. Just a little bit of a delay. Sorry about that, guys. Meanwhile, I am also loading this up in Lightroom, so we're not losing any time here. We're moving and grooving. Okay, go back to cam link. Maybe it will be freshly restarted now. Boom, there we go. Ooh, I'm feeling a little sweaty. Little bit sweaty. Working in the air condition. Okay, so yeah, so what we're gonna do now is I'm gonna pull up well, I'm gonna actually take a sip of water first. Delicious. So I'm gonna pull up Lightroom over here so that we can see what we got. Boom, boom, boom. Cool, cool, cool. And then go to library, import. And then, yeah, so here's our shots. We'll get rid of this first one that we know is too bright. And actually, we only missed one single shot. So that's good. But yeah, you can see on a few of these that I was standing in the way on the first run that I did. But let's import this. This is going to take just a minute. I'm all out of tea. Now I'm going to give these other cameras a temporary rest. All right. At least the subject does not move if you have to reshoot. That's true. Sometimes when I'm not going to reshoot in the same day to keep dust and stuff from getting on top of all of the candy, I'll just put like a some kind of cloth or something over the top. But that sometimes backfires on gummy candy like this, where it'll like cling to the fabric. So when you pull it up, they all go flying and you're like, oh, great. That's good. You talk about taking 2 shots per framing. I'm always on 5 frames per second, low speed mechanical. I may just squeeze off 1 frame, but usually because I'm shooting telly, it's 2 or 3 insurance. Yeah. I think the Pentax only has like a 3 frame per second. I think. I'm not 100% sure, but it's definitely not much. Like that deep salmon background color with the brown and white. Yeah. That one was a fun one. I was kind of retouching up a few parts of it. Still bringing in some more. I think the camera is still a bit glitchy, so I don't know why that is, but we'll try to roll with it. I'm going to be bad one more time, guys. This one was never going to get used. It's got a bunch of holes in it. We can see what the gingerbread man tastes like. Okay. Oh, might be the best one yet. It kind of has like it almost tastes like there's carbonation in it. All right. So we are going to kind of ignore like this shot. And I think because of time, we'll really focus on the candy stuff. So we'll dive into these guys here. What I was talking about before, like where depending on how I'm standing on that ladder based on where the light is, something like this will sometimes happen where I'll just have like this heavy shadow in the shot and I won't notice it in camera because I don't necessarily look at each individual picture. But then I'll get back to the software and I'll be like, oh, it's like very deflating. Luckily, this time I did notice it and I reminded myself not to stand in the way. So we will definitely not pick any of those. But first pass here, we kind of just go in and mark ones that we think might look good. I like to do this in the development tab so I can like really zoom in and just make sure that they're like in focus. Because sometimes like this is going to be a little bit less in focus. You can see the background is sharper. So it may be that for this shot, it was focused on the background. Yeah, kind of hard to tell. But we won't look at the background for each one of these. If I have to, I'll go back and manually do it. This is also a case where like in this shot, and we might need to kind of move these gummies around. I don't want them to be perfectly far apart, but I'm also kind of looking at this dead space up in the top right-hand side where it's like that to me doesn't look as good. So, in this second one where we see a little bit more of the green and the brown, okay, that makes it a little less, dead spacey, but if that's reoccurrent in a lot of these, then we'll have to go in. Like even on this one, you have so many candies, but then this top area right here, you don't have any. And I don't like that. So we may have to like move a few of these around. And oftentimes I'll move like one or two. The dark purple. Sorry, I might have missed what the dark purple was in reference to. I like this one though. We do get plenty of coverage. Looks like it, I think actually we might have been focusing on the background for a lot of these. It's harder to tell with this candy, but this one's a good example where you can see there's a little bit more definition here and a little bit less definition up on the top. So in cases like that, if I'm seeing that, you know, sort of like reoccurring over and over, and I'm just missing all of them, then I'll just flip it into manual mode and I'll manually focus everything. Some candy, you don't really need to do that. Other candy, you do. So this one looks like it is nice and sharp. That's nice and sharp. So this angle worked out. And it's got a good spread, so we'll claim that one. And then this one's not looking too bad. Nice and sharp on the eyes, which is great. Might grab that one too. And you'll see a few different variations, and some of these will have to rotate. But we'll focus mainly on the top-down shot. This one ended up a little bit dark. But yeah, this one nice and crisp. I'd be interested to know what you guys, which ones, like what angle of attack you guys like on these gummies. See, this is a good example where like I don't love how close I got to this one, because we have it nice and sharp, like right here at his neck, but then already by his eyes, it's starting to get really soft, and down by his legs, it's basically blurry. And so it's like, if I can't even get the whole gummy in focus, that tends to bother me. So that's why I tend not to shoot as much from this particular angle. That said, in the future, when we have a better tilt shift system, we may do more of that. Okay. Let's see. Ooh, this one could be good. Oh, rotated the wrong way. And yeah, this is a good call out for this particular camera, and it's also a little bit where I'm standing, where the flash is, but it also does seem to be that if you rotate this camera, you will see this darker area move with the rotation. But you can kind of see in this image, it is quite a bit darker in this corner and a bit darker along the line. Now, typically, I guess it depends on which angle I was holding this at, but I think this darker side down here is actually just I'm standing in the way. But the darker aspect of this other part is potentially like a shutter issue. But we can fix that in post, and I'll show you how we do it. But let me find like a good... Oh, we're already at the end. Wow. All right, we're going to go back. See if we got like a good kind of wide angle one. So yeah, this is a perfect example. And this is not, yeah, this definitely was not getting it in focus. That's a bit softer. So we would, more ideally, we would go back and do two things on this. First is we would manually focus, but also I would look at where all this candy is and what is it that's causing like a little bit of a dead zone here, because I've seen that in multiple shots where like generally this left-hand side, top left, is a bit more spaced out and it's kind of bugging me. I'd love to have one more piece of candy up here just to make it feel a little more even, edge to edge, filling the screen. So this is one that we would probably reshoot, but this is definitely like a shot that I wanted to get. I would also probably look at the candy now, seeing it on camera, and I'd say, okay, this yellow candy, does that bother me that it's not shaped correctly? And would I want to go to the trouble to replace it with something else that maybe is slightly more well-rounded? You know, a little pun for you. But yeah, so if we were going to edit this, and actually let me see if there's one that maybe, see, this is a better one. And sometimes just zooming in a way is a little better, because now we do get more edge to edge coverage because we just zoomed in a bit. And it does look like this one is a little bit more in focus. It might still be not the sharpest it could be. So again, like this one, much sharper. But yeah, anyway, so we might want to manually focus that. But what I would do as far as an edit goes is I would look at this side, the left-hand side, and the bottom is noticeably a bit darker. And what's weird is that the right-hand bottom corner is where the flash is coming from. So realistically, like this bottom area should be nice and bright all the way around, and yet there's sort of this line of darker element. And I think that might be in part caused by maybe this camera's shutter or something, which is not a happy thought to have, but it's been there since the first day I shot with it, and I've shot a lot of photos on it, so it hasn't gotten any worse. That's good. But what we would do is typically, first kind of thing is make a little few minor corrections. In this case, want to brighten it up a little bit. Already it's kind of popping a little more, which looks nice. But we do have some of these that are catching a little too much in the highlights now. So we might look at kind of pulling those highlights back specifically. And some of that's just going to be baked in where it'll be deeper edits to remove. And then I also like to bring up the shadows just a little bit, not too much, but that's mainly because I'm actually going to bring down the blacks a little bit and get a little more rich color out of it. And that way the shadows don't get too dark, because I do like it when the shadows are not jet black, but they're like a little lighter. So that is, you know, kind of fun. Top down is definitely pattern. The angle ones are more of a, you notice it as candy, not a bad thing. Yeah, I think they both work, and I think we would probably use one of each. But as far as the edit, we'll kind of do this one. Sometimes I'll play with this white slider, but not too often. And then for this, we don't really need any more contrast at all, because if we add in that contrast, the highlights start to really look blown out. So I've kind of applied a little bit of a basic edit, and when I apply this edit, it makes the issue areas more prominent, and that being kind of this darker run and this lighter, brighter area. And we want to even that out. And so this just takes a little bit of finessing. And I notice on other cameras, there is less of a need to do a ton of different masks. So this is a burden that I have to bear with this Pentax, which I think is not a Pentax problem. It's just this specific camera has a shutter that may be dying. And also based on how the studio is set up, it's not ideal. So now we're going to add in a little bit of brightness, just a hair. 41, maybe even more than we really need, but that looks a lot better. And we're going to add another mask here. Same one. And just do this side that was a little bit darker. And same thing, I'll go to 41, see what that does. Looks pretty solid. And then what I also like to do is go in, add another mask here. And I'll kind of have it come in from this angle, which is what the flash was coming in. And this time we won't adjust the exposure. We'll just bring down the highlights a little bit so they're not as intense. And then we'll create another mask. And this one I'm actually going to target in this specific corner, which seems to be the worst area in terms of issues for this camera. I'm going to add a little bit of shadow reduction. And maybe just a hair for exposure. And so already this is looking a lot better. So if we jump out of that, reopened it. And now if we just do kind of like a before and after. So you can see there's a lot more darkness in the bottom right, but just in the right hand side in general, there's more darkness and there's a bit more lightness on the, no, I've got these backwards. On the right-hand side, it's much brighter. On the left-hand side, it's much darker. And on the bottom left-hand side, it's the most dark. Then with our corrections, it's a bit more evened out. Now, I can already say that the bottom right-hand side needs to be brought down a little bit more. But this is looking a lot better. Now, as far as we're kind of catching some highlights here in the candy. So we can play around with the height and distance of our flash. So we can maybe move the flash a little further back, or we can raise or lower that flash to see if we can put those highlights in a spot that no longer reflect. That will also impact the shadow cast. So then we'll want to look at the shadow cast to basically say, you know, is this too long of a shadow cast or too short of a shadow cast for what we want to do? Sometimes I like to do a really long one, and sometimes I like to do a nice short one. So it just kind of depends. But I think my live stream is having some issues today. Looks like we're having a keyframe issue, whatever that is. So hopefully it doesn't look too bad for you guys. My apologies if it does. But jumping back into this, yeah, I think we could benefit from adding in another mask and kind of making it the attack angle a little bit more sideways here. And then we'll go in, and sometimes we can actually bring down the exposure. And I think that actually looked great. That one brought it down just a bit. Okay, so that's looking a lot better. And I will also say I do have to sleep on it and then come back and make some additional fine tunings. The more I'm looking at this now, especially when we compare before and after, I'm thinking maybe this is a little too bright now, where maybe we want to bring the shadow area back down. So we kind of play around with that, or maybe bring the exposure back down a little bit. But another thing that we also need to do And this is kind of like an issue with this backdrop where it maybe needs to get replaced, but it now, after cleaning it so many times, I think the paint or whatever outer layer has started to come off. And so it looks like there's a lot of dirt on it when in fact there's not. So that is a little bit unfortunate. But what I like to do is come in here and, kind of look for any larger pieces that would show up in a print or, something that, like, when we're zoomed out, we can see some of these little tiny specks. So can we go in and remove those specks so that the background looks a little more solid in color? Ultimately, the biggest thing is I'll need to come in and just buy a new backdrop. Like, this one's toast. So I like to use the eraser tool, the remove tool. And I will play around with different settings. Usually I'm using the remove tool, but depending on what it is, sometimes I'll use the heal tool or the cloning tool. And it's worth noting that these tools are using like an algorithm or potentially even using AI, but they are distinctly separate from the generative AI. And that generative AI is one that I typically kind of steer away from because I haven't been super impressed with AI in general. So I usually don't use that one. But for anyone who's an AI head out there, there is a generative AI tool that you can use also. But what we basically do is just go through here and remove all the big ones. And sometimes you have a more smooth backdrop. We wiped it down, but it's just that the paint's peeling off. And then I'll go back, kind of zoom out. Okay, now I'm not seeing that speck that I was seeing before. But over here on the yellow one, I'm seeing some specks. If I zoom in, it's this one that's showing up because it's so big. So we'll remove that. Depending on the size of the file, depending on if you remembered to clean it or not, you may be looking at doing this for a long time to get rid of all the hair follicles and some of the bigger smudges and whatnot. The other thing is we also want to look at the candy itself to make sure that we don't have any hair or dirt or anything that got on the candy. So as an example, we have what looks like could maybe be a hair. So I'm just going to come in here and just paint this real quick. That way that's gone. And now it looks as though there was nothing there. Another good example of this tool, I don't think we have one, but like if there was an imperfection, which there always will be, but if there was a significant imperfection that we miss, like this gummy has a hole in it, a lot of times you can make that hole disappear by using the remove tool, which is really nifty. I think also maybe my wipe left a bunch of stuff on this paper, which is great. But yeah, here's a few pieces of dust that are a little bit larger, so we'll go in and we'll delete these out. I try not to do anything that will fundamentally change the image to really keep the image as true to what I laid out and shot, but also it's not my intention for there to be dirt and dust on all this. And I did take steps to wipe the backdrop down and make sure there was no dust. So to me, I feel fully empowered to come in here and manually remove the dust that I tried to remove in the physical world here in the software world. And usually the backdrop does not look this bad. I did not realize this backdrop was in such sorry shape. So I guess we'll have to replace it. It kind of sucks because it's not the best backdrop anyway. I don't love it. But it's not cheap to replace, and they're heavy. Okay. So kind of looking. So then what I'll typically do is I'll just come in here and I'll look at each piece of candy. This is usually what I do last. Like there's still some hair here that I need to remove. So I would not really be at the candy check stage, but basically go to each piece of candy and see, is there any dirt or hair or weird thing that I need to know about on each piece of candy. And I'll usually break it out by quadrant. because I have done a few where there was hair and I didn't notice until I printed it. And then in the print, you can see the hair. So here's one. Here's a little piece of like dirt or something on this piece of candy. And if that came out in the print, it's so small, but it would drive me nuts because I would think, oh, people are going to think I'm an idiot who doesn't know what he's doing. So I'll go in and remove that. Boom. Now the candy looks perfect. And yeah, normally I would be going through each section and checking the backdrop and like removing all the stuff from the backdrop until it's like a perfect red. But we do not have time for that right now. And that is usually reserved for like once I have edited a few images and I've sat on it a few days and I've come back and made some additional tweaks and et cetera, and I get to a point where I say, okay, I've picked out the 1 or 2 images that I'm dead set on doing, then I'll go in and do that final sort of like really deep dive into like removing a bunch of stuff in here. But I try not to do that for every single photo until I've for sure decided like this is going to be used in some capacity. So yeah, we'd basically go in, remove all these hairs. There's a piece of dirt there. I actually noticed in a photo I showed earlier, there was a piece of something that I missed. I was like, oh no, I got to go back and fix it. I may need to buy better paper towels too. This left a lot of debris over here. So anyway, I'm not going to do the whole thing, but you get the idea. We go in, we remove all the stuff. That way we have a nice clean image. And you'd be surprised like how well this tool works. I used to have to do a different tool before they came out with this one. And you're talking about 3 times as much time to like click and then figure out where you want it to be. And is oof. So good on Adobe for this particular tool. Okay, so we'll pretend that we did everything there. So now we'll back out. And then we kind of get into some of the color adjustments or more extensive adjustments, but that's usually the extent that I want to go. I will sometimes play with the white balance if I'm getting a feeling that this is looking a little too warm or too cool, which on this Pentax camera, more often the issue is it's going to be too warm than too cool. But sometimes we might go in and add just a smidge of clarity or of texture. I don't do the clarity. I pretty much never touch vibrance or saturation because these Pentax files are already so vibrant and saturated. And we don't want to pass into sort of the realm of like, oh, this is disgustingly oversaturated. So we won't really touch that. Sometimes we'll play with our curvatures and kind of come up with a little more contrast, a little smoother image. I don't know in this case that I would necessarily go that route, although that particular one I did wasn't too bad. It does highlight though that there is probably a little more work that needs to be done masking wise on the right hand side of this image, and maybe even some more on the left. I keep saying right and left. I never get those wrong, but on this video I'm getting them wrong. One thing though, I do miss back in the day, they had a toggle switch. So you could do a whole bunch of edits in here and then you could just toggle it off without having to undo your edits. And now if you decide, okay, I don't want, this the way it is, you have to reset it. And it's like, that kind of sucks. But a big tool that I do use from time to time is this HSL box here. This is a big one for me. Not always. Sometimes, and I would say an image like this, a lot of times I can look over at the table and see, does this look how they are looking in reality? But if there is any issue, usually in the backdrop where maybe we want to do something with the backdrop. And like in this example, maybe the backdrop is too, red, or it's too dark, or it's too whatever. Then we can get in here and play around. We can increase the luminance. We could decrease the luminance. Usually when I do that, it is a subtle amount. It's within, less than a 15 degree, I guess not degree, but less than 15 one way or the other. So that can help if the background looks darker, but then in the photo it looks lighter. You can maybe play around with that. That's also a benefit in making sure that your backdrop is never the same color as your subject, because then you have way more flexibility where you don't have to get into the masking. Because sometimes I will mask out the entire background and then adjust the color or the exposure settings for the entire background and leave the candy totally fine. Other times I might mask out all of the candy and then just independently make adjustments there. And then sometimes specific candy, I might go in and try to do some color adjustments too. So it can get pretty extensive. Hue is also a big one. So like if this backdrop was looking a little weird, we could adjust it one way or another. Boom, totally different color backdrop. But this obviously will impact the way the candy looks as well, especially if you're getting extreme with it. And then saturation is not one that I use often because, again, this is already a bit saturated. So I only use that in like a more extreme setting. But I think actually in this specific case, all of the candy looks pretty good. The one that maybe could use some work here is the purple. It doesn't look bad, and it does look probably about the same as that purple, but maybe we want it to pop a little bit more. So, we might go in and maybe kick up a little brightness for it, or decrease the brightness sometimes. Might make it look a little more rich. Yeah, I think actually that improved it. There. And maybe just a kick more. So let me see before and after. Yeah, it didn't do much in the way of the purples, but we could also specifically mask out the purples and mess with them more that way, because of course we're providing like a global change here, and in this case it might be better to do a localized change. Sometimes I do add some sharpening, but honestly I find this lens and camera are already sharp, so by adding in more sharpening, we're really just going to get more noise than it's probably worth. So I typically just leave it as whatever the default setting is. And with this specific camera, there's really never a need to remove any of the noise because it's such a low noise system, even when you're shooting at the higher ISOs. So I never notice any issue there. Do you use highlight recovery or mask a sharpening on select candies? Not really in terms of like masking to sharpen a specific candy. For highlights, yes. I will sometimes go in much more extensively and try to, like, in my mind, fix this section that is a little bit too bright. But, when you're shooting at this angle, there's always going to be a little bit of highlight on here. And I think that's part of the charm of the photo. So it just depends. It's sort of like an undetermined level of how much am I willing to accept how bright or dark something is. So in this case, this particular candy, this pink one, and these two yellow ones are standing out to me as a little bit hot. And so I might go in and fix that. But honestly, before I would make an effort to fix those highlights, I would probably just make an adjustment to my flash position and see if I can resolve that issue sort of in studio or in camera, as opposed to doing it in the software. More so because I lack as much skill, so it takes me a long time to fix these sort of highlight issues than if I just make a quick adjustment to the flash, take a couple pictures, see where I can remove it via the physical world. Then that to me is so much faster and then requires less edits. So only really happens if I have like an image where I'm just like, dang, I took the perfect shot, but there's a weird highlight or a weird shadow. Then yeah, I'll go in and do some more masking. And sometimes I'll even just import it into Photoshop at that point, because Photoshop just has a little bit better tools to do that, and you just have more available. So in Lightroom, it's a little trickier. That said, I wouldn't do it on this particular shot because, well, I don't know. Maybe this guy is in focus. Maybe it doesn't need a manual. I would probably go back and try to recreate this exact same shot, but do it in manual focusing and see if I get this guy sharper in camera, so to speak. And if I'm able to, then I would say, okay, that's the image that's worth spending more time on. As it stands now, this is not out of focus, and this would certainly pass. And if I went and got it printed, I'd forget all about the fact that I felt that it was maybe not as sharp as it could be. But just zooming in and looking at it, it does kind of feel like maybe it could be slightly more in focus. But it can be hard to tell because you're basing that off of the texture of the candy, and sometimes candy is just less defined, a lot more smooth, and so a lot harder to tell if it's in focus or if it's out of focus. Versus like this one over here, you can definitely tell. The A is noticeably more blurry than the bottom is. But it's hard to tell, is the very bottom in focus or is the top of this first groove in focus? Because if it's that the top of the first groove is in focus, that would pretty much be in line with the top of this gingerbread man, which would mean that the gingerbread man is in fact in focus. So, and actually, see, this gingerbread man looks way more sharp than this middle one. Yeah, some of these, this could actually be a case where maybe the camera did shake a little bit, or the other possibility, because yeah, this guy is really sharp, is that when you're holding the camera handheld, and this is the biggest limitation of handheld, is that you might not be perfectly level in terms of the plane of focus or the pane of focus. I don't know which way it's supposed to be said, but it might be that, you know, you have your flat subject, but then your camera's just tweaked a little bit. And so you have something really sharp in focus, but then something on the other side that's out of focus. And you're like, how is that? And it's because, well, I didn't shoot this perfectly straight down. I was a little bit crooked, a little bit tilted up one way or another. Not as big a problem when you are being really careful and when you are shooting at kind of these larger apertures where you have more depth of field in focus, but definitely periodically does come up and you notice it more. And I think this might be the case where you have something on the extreme edge, which is nice and sharp, and then the other extreme edge, totally blurry. And then that's kind of an indication that, okay, I think I was a little bit tweaked when I shot this. Some of that's going to be the case, though, because I am doing this live, so I'm not in the right mindset. I'm more of it in the entertainment mindset. But yeah. So that would be pretty much it for a shot like this. The one other thing I'd probably check is I'd play around with the white balance, because I think this is feeling a bit warm. And I think that might actually be closer. Now, another thing that you will notice too is that because we made some of those adjustments to the sides, if you really look at this image now, there's a totally different color over here than over here in the backdrop. And that's because we've manipulated the exposure more on this side than we have the other side. So now we may need to go in, and this happens pretty frequently, where we need to go back to the masks that we did where we raised the exposure and provide some adjustment to the color, mainly white balance, to sort of bring it back to the same color as the rest of the image. So like as an example, if we go to this corner here, so we grab that mask, and then if we were to warm this back up a little bit, and it may depend on whether we warm it or do we use more of a tint. And then sometimes you can easily overdo it, and that's where sleeping on it a lot of times comes into play. We go over here. Let's do kind of the same thing. Let's warm it up slightly. But we got to be careful not to make it, yellow. And I don't know, that might have made it a little too yellow. And then we'll go to the bottom one. Okay, that's a lot better looking now. But I almost even feel like we may need to do like brand new layers all together just for the color changes. So you'd have your layers for your exposure adjustments and then other layers that you can fine tune for your white balance setting. Quite interesting how the highlights and the angles of the gingerbread men shows the details. Yeah. Yep. So jumping back out of this, I think I would actually decrease this back down just a little bit. And then, yeah, now I think we have a much more even image. We did increase and do some color adjustment on these lower sections. But now I think we have kind of the perfect in between. It's still not, too cold or too warm. And this looks a lot closer to what it looks like in real life. Now, again, we don't necessarily need to make it look perfectly identical to real life. That's part of the fun of being creative. But yeah, I think we've gotten this to a better place. So this is before. This is straight out of camera. And then this is our adjustments that we've done. And I think that looks pretty good. If this were an image I was keeping, what I would do is I would export this, and then I would do my tried and true method, which is to import it onto my phone, whether that's via the cable or via like Google Drive. But I would basically export it out of Lightroom, bring it over to my phone, and then see how I feel about it on my phone. That is my version of like, if you're an artist, a musician, and you're mixing and mastering your song. And then a lot of musicians will say, before I'm done, before I can say, okay, this song's finished, I have to try it out in the car and see how it sounds. And so that's the same kind of thing for me. I always got to bring it onto the phone and just see if it looks any different. Sometimes I'll notice things because it's kind of in a different screen and it's maybe a little smaller, and I'll notice like any imperfections in terms of like, ooh, I was a little too heavy handed with a mask here, or I wasn't, doing enough to even out the exposure on this side, things like that. So it's one hand sleeping on it, and it's one hand kind of looking at the image on my phone before I can be like, okay, this one looks good. So I think that's pretty much it for the candy art stuff. I think because of the time now, I'll probably just put a sheet on this candy and shoot it some more tomorrow when I have no longer the entertainment side and I can just only focus on the artwork. And then that way I can maybe get these shots a little closer to what I'm looking for. We have a few. Are you using a calibrated screen? I use Windows with a calibrated monitor. If I look at it on the phone and iMac, it can look a bit different. Yeah, it definitely will. It's kind of like, it's like a musician also, in that when they're mixing and mastering that song, they're kind of doing so, but they know that how people listen to this is going to be massively different. Some people are going to have this playing on their phone on just like the speaker, right? Maybe they're watching it on YouTube. Some people are going to be using a pair of headphones, and then they might be using a pair of over-the-ear headphones. They might be using a pair of in-ear headphones. They might be sitting with speakers in front of them. They might be in a car. Every car is a little bit different. Some are better, some are worse in terms of their stereo setups. So it's like, how can we mix and master this so that it'll sound good across multiple devices? But also, like, I think the same is the case, and you probably know more about this than I, but the same is the case for the screens that you're viewing it on, like a phone screen versus an iMac screen versus a TV screen, a computer screen, like, could look a little different between each of these. And when you physically print it out, sometimes it looks really good on a computer screen, and then you get it printed and you go, what the heck happened? Why does this look so bright or so dark, or whatever it may be? So yeah, definitely the case. I would say I probably ought to recalibrate this monitor. I think I did so a long time ago, but I think I may have also swapped the two monitors, and I think I only calibrated one. So that's probably part of it. And I will also say that, unfortunately, I don't have a photography specific monitor. So it's definitely not set up for the most level of success, where it's like, yeah, this is a monitor that specifically is geared towards photography. And maybe that's something in the future I'll look into. But for now, the tried and true method for me is to double check it in my cell phone later on. But yeah. Okay, so I think that's going to bring us to the end of this live stream. For some reason, we have keyframe error that keeps popping up. Hopefully the footage is not totally cruddy. But yeah, that is the experience of setting up the candy, photographing the candy, then editing the candy. And then now we would be really at like sort of stage 2, which is where I would then pick the camera back up, go back over there and shoot again with the knowledge I now have to try to get the shots even a little bit closer to what I want. So I would probably adjust a few gummies, maybe move a few around, or kind of scrunch a few more together. And then I would also reshoot, possibly in manual focus, to see if I can get a little bit sharper image. That does slow things down a little bit. So I always start with autofocus. And then, yeah, we would just do it until we get really a handful of ones that we like a lot. I like getting one good wide one good close-up one, maybe one that's at a unique angle, and then maybe also throwing in a few that are a little bit more vertical. So at least 5 versions. I like to have like a fully edited, this is perfect version. And then I'll kind of sit on it for a while and decide which one I want to be sort of the chosen image from the set. That doesn't mean that I will totally discard everything else. Sometimes I'll use some of the other ones in another capacity, but there's almost a desire to find one single image that would then be the main image. So if I was going to do a gallery or a photo book or whatever, it would be like, unquestionably, this is the image from the gingerbread series that's going to be used in that. And then maybe some of these other images get used on social media, or in a YouTube video, or maybe even if I want to do like a gallery where I have 3 different versions of the same image. Okay, maybe we'll include some of those, but there's always one image that sort of gets chosen as like the main image. So, but yeah, that's how the workflow tends to go. Hopefully that's enjoyable to see. This has been awesome. Thanks, Colton. Learned a lot. Thanks for your time and sharing your workflow. Yeah, absolutely. Definitely could do more with edits. I know there's a lot of folks that do, but I think for me, it's a good amount of edit to get the image looking nice without me spending so much time airbrushing and doing a bunch of stuff that ultimately I think I'm less interested in. But yeah, I'm glad you guys liked it. But with that being said, we're over the 3-hour mark and I need to get myself to bed because I am sick and all this talking definitely did not help my voice and my throat. So I'm going to get some tea and maybe put on an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation because I'm a bit of a 90s sci-fi nerd, and enjoy the rest of the remaining evening before bed. But if you guys do have any thoughts, if you have any questions, and you're watching this and it's not live, definitely feel encouraged to put those comments on the video because I will be notified and I will go back and answer every comment that I get. And maybe even if it's just like, hey, this was a cool live stream and I want to see you do this other thing next time, I can make a note on my little sticky notes here that for the next live stream to do some other thing. So that's always welcome on these videos. And just as a reminder, a really fun video coming out on Saturday where I took the E500 and a special filter to the carnival and got some really unique shots. And I teamed up with another local artist who does concert footage on vintage tapes. So like Super VHS and High 8. So his channel, really cool from that standpoint, and worth checking out. But he came out and filmed a bunch of stuff. So we kind of have a mix of his tape footage, my photos. So I think that'll be a really fun one. And that's going to come out on Saturday. So yeah, have a Merry Christmas if you don't stream before. I think this probably will be the only stream for December, but you never know. We might do another one because I did take a whole week off, so we might squeeze one more in. But yeah, Merry Christmas to you too. Happy holidays for anyone who doesn't celebrate Christmas. And yeah, exciting stuff as we wrap up the rest of this year and we kick off for 2025. So I think with that said, that's going to be it for me, guys. I appreciate it. Thank you all for watching, commenting, sharing. Definitely makes it more enjoyable for me. So I definitely appreciate it. But yeah, have a great rest of y'all's evening and I'll see you in the next one.